All right, so I started a video and described this somewhat new deck, which is this Golos Tireless Pilgrim deck that seems to be a upgraded version of Brea. And there's a video out there describing kind of what the differences are, what the thought process was behind it. This video is going to be gameplay. So if you are interested in that and you just want to hear the talking, take a look for the other video and you can get the intro. But here's the deck list. I'm not going to dive into it too far. I will point out though, however, that in some of the games that we played, not all of the deck wasn't precisely this build. For example, this Mystic Teachings was actually the 4-mana Karn that acts like a null rod for your opponent. Karn, the Great Creator, was actually taking the place of Mystical Teachings from most of these games, and I think there were a few other minor changes, but overall this is the end state final build of the deck for now, and I'm going to just leave it like that, and we'll just run through the games, but if I see any cards that I'm not currently using, I'll just try to point those out as they come up. I don't even know that I'll necessarily have their replacements memorized, but we'll run through it. So I'm going back, I'm looking at, so I was playing I was dinking around in 1v1 against 5-color bad stuff here, and he was playing Golos, and this actually is what tipped me off that I needed to take a hard look at this commander because I had not taken it seriously, and that was, he showed me that was definitely a mistake by look at this. He beat me here 1-2, beat me here 0-2, and then I beat him, but it was like every game was just a nail biter. It was super hard. It was 1v1, so I was lacking some of the best tools, and I was running the Brea deck, but this was the eye-opening, I need to build a Golos deck thing. And then my friend Brian Weissman came from Seattle, where he lives, and came out to visit here in Utah, and I actually got a chance to hang out with my friend in person. We played, he brought enough of his cards that we were able to sit down and play, and I was telling him about how I had this experience with the Golos and I wanted to play, and he had almost enough cards. I had a Sharpie and some old Magic cards that I could write on to pen in the ones that he didn't think to bring from his collection. And we sat down to build this deck, and what you'll see now is the result of that effort, which we tried to build a Golos deck and then sort of refined it as we went. So played a couple games in the 14th and then the 15th, and then a bunch of games on the 15th and a bunch of games on the 16th as well, which is today. Most of these, if you look at the time, 12, 12, 12. These were early this morning, and then I played one just before I did the video just to refresh my memory, and also because I was looking to get a nice, I wanted to get a little bit more of a feel for it before I started talking about it. So I'm going to start with this. I'm pretty sure the 14th was the Golos. If this was Brea, I'm going to skip it and we'll jump to the 15th, but we'll start with the 14th against Temet here, to Temet, and we'll see if this is it. I think what I ended up doing was I put together a basic package for the Golos deck and played, I think, a couple games with it, and then was like, hey, Brian's going to be in town, and I'm going to finish, I'll just set it aside and we'll figure it out after he gets in town. So I think that's how it went. Let me take a look. Nope, I guess this was Brea. Okay, so these were Brea games. I'm not going to run through these. We'll skip to the 15th. Yeah, so you can see it starts 9:40 9:40 p.m. I put together a tentative version but didn't play it. That's what it was. And then Brian came. We sat down at the kitchen table. We literally did a kitchen table magic, and then we played. And then we were like, okay, let's jump over and build this thing online and check it out. So this was the result of that. So starting on 8:15 at 9:40. Very excited about this deck. It feels really, really good to play. The Brea deck feels really good to play, right, and is very enjoyable. This feels even better. All right, so this opponent here is running a commander I wasn't really familiar with, Gaiuda, Doom of Depths, a companion commander. However, he's playing it as just straight up as the commander, not as a companion. And so when it comes into play, each player mills 4 cards. Then he can put a creature card with an even converted mana cost from among the milled cards onto the battlefield under his control. So there's some pretty ridiculous even casting cost threats that you can play. So this clearly seems to be in the vein of like a reanimator package, where my opponent's going to play a reanimator deck, a blue-black reanimator, and occasionally the commander will just cheat the thing that he wants into play anyway. And opening hand here it's not stellar, right? But it's playable, so we'll keep it. The Golos deck does tend to get some very keepable, more keepable hands because it has the additional Felwar Stone and the other artifact. It has extra artifact mana in the 2 slot. 1 second. Yes, son.
I need to get my blue and orange handling shovel on the tree.
Okay, I'll help you get it. Okay. I'm going to finish my video, okay?
Okay.
All right, it's going to be a little while. All right, so anyway, sorry about that. Anyhow, so opponent gets a second turn Talisman. I get a second turn Felwar Stone. Excited, Tom?
Yep.
Do you see yourself down there? Cool, it's my son Thomas. I actually put together a video, some of you may have seen it, the King of Hearthstone video. Thomas actually loves to play Hearthstone, and he ran through, he was showing off his deck list, so you can check that out if you're interested. But that was mostly for sort of family and friends type video.
Yep. It was so cool, you would never guess.
Thanks, son.
And it was so awesome.
Well, I appreciate. Hold on. I appreciate your help, big boy. Daddy's gonna finish making this video, so I'm gonna have to make it without you. Okay? You can just watch, though. All right. So the start here basically is the dance of development here, where from blue players we end up we have a force of negation, so it's pretty safe to tap out. So we fabricate for a mana crypt here. Went turn 2 Felwar, turn 3 tapped land, fabricate for the crypt. Opponent's developing over there. So far, not a lot happening, but of course that's about to change. Going to run out Transmuted Muddle here and go grab a mana drain and pop a top into play, which will hopefully allow us to continue to hit mana drops. Now I've got 2 counterspells up and a mana drain along with a spicy mana drain target of Mind Twist. So the game plan, what we're hoping for is that the person's just foolish enough to run their commander directly into mana drain. Maybe they have Force of Will and they think that it'll be safe. Instead, opponent's not playing that foolishly and just plays a Mind Stone. But since his Divine Cop does reveal mana, but it reveals Soul Ring, which is amazing. So we clear the combat step and decide the play here is going to be to go after a Mind Twist 4/4 with mana drain, mana up. And then if this goes wrong, we can force a negation here. Now, if it hits, the opponent they sacked a Mind Stone to pick up an extra card to try to protect one of the cards in their hand. But even if that happens, a Mind Twist for 4 resolving against a hand of 4 or 5 is still devastating and should be enough to put the game out of reach for the opponent for the most part. So opponent's turn now. So this should have talked them into hopefully trying for their commander. And the 6 mana from that will then just fuel a gigantic Yawgmoth's Will or Tezzeret or both. Instead, the opponent clones a Soul Ring. We're not going to fight over a copy artifact. So containing their mana is valuable when they have cards in hand because they're trying to get those cards onto the table. But when they do not have cards, containing their mana is not as important. So we just let it go. And you can see this is pretty early in our experimenting with the deck, so we're kind of getting used to when to play the commander. And right now, kind of playing the deck as if we really don't have a commander, right? We're not really leveraging Golos' abilities, not really thinking about the impact that it has on the board or any of that. We're just kind of playing the familiar game plan that we would play in a Brea deck. When it gets a Dreamscape Artist, we can go ahead and fetch a solution to that vis-a-vis Vedokin Shackles at some point. And then finally, the opponent runs out their commanders. So this is the point where we're going to go ahead and mana drain. And that's just going to be a gigantic punish for the opponent here. Go ahead and take a look. See a Merchant Scroll. That's good because that puts a blue card on top for Force of Negation, so we can have a big turn here and still do the Force of Negation if needed. I'm going to do a Merchant Scroll for Fact or Fiction and charge up that graveyard even further before Yawgmoth's Willing. And then the opponent makes this inexplicable split, this 4-1 split, and it's well, in that case, I guess we don't even need to Yawg-Will. We'll just continue to put cards in the bin for now and just set up this way and get even more mana so that the Yawgmoth's Will is even more devastating down the road. Yeah, and put the opponent into Winter Orb prison. And at this point, the opponent's looking at the board state and decides, yeah, it's fine, I'll scoop it up. I mean, they can't activate this thing. They have one card in hand, only 2 mana per turn. We've got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 mana per turn to their 2. It's probably over, and in a couple turns, Dack Fayden's going to take that away and make it 1. And of course, unbeknownst to them, we have this gigantic Yawgmoth's Will that's just going to be a monster right here. So opponent scoops it up. Commander never really comes into play. It's just traditional control elements there. So we'll move on to game 2 and see what happens. So the next opponent, Junkie Juice 67. And for some of these, what was really cool is Brian, for some of these I played, and for some of these, many of them, in fact, Brian piloted the deck, and I was co-piloting, and because he was over here visiting, he was using my laptop, so I just kind of sat behind him, and we were able to collaborate. So I feel bad for some of these opponents because they were facing both of us essentially able to use the combined years of experience that we have in strategy and control to make things pretty challenging for the opponent, I think. So the first hand we had was like a Treachery and 6 lands. It was very, very slow. And took a mulligan because his format's a little too quick for a hand like that. Second hand has Vandal Blast and Strip Mine. We're definitely, and Dack Fayden, so we're going to keep that because although it doesn't have any speed, it has the ability to decelerate an opponent. And the top deck of the Arcane Signet's really good right there. Hopefully, so soon enough, we're going to realize the power that is Golos and start leveraging that power. But we'll see if, I don't remember if it's this game or not. All right, so no fetch there. Just going to take it easy and develop a little bit further with this Arcane Signet. Top deck to Teferi, which is pretty nice. Gives us like a... Next couple of turns should look really good. For example, if the opponent plays Artifact Mana here, we get to go Strip Mine, Dack Fayden, steal your mana, and then use that mana to play the Teferi the turn after. So it's looking real nice if that were to occur. If not, there's a couple different routes we can take here. One of them may be to still do the Strip Mine Dack play and then use Dack to dig for Artifact Mana on our side. But when we draw Artifact Mana here, it's like, okay, we're going to play Dack. We're going to start digging. So now, remember, this is Karn, and what it should be is Mystic Teachings. And you can see how much better Mystic Teachings would be. I mean, we're throwing away a Vandal Blast with the Dack Fayden out, and a Karn. It's a little much, right? Unnecessary. So a Teachings would have been phenomenal here because then we could go set up with whatever we wanted. For some reason, the opponent doesn't attack Dack Fayden. There is a weird error, but anyway, we're just going to plus up, throw away a few other lands that we don't have, and play a Mana Vault here. Run the Vault into a Golos, and use Golos to go get Wasteland. And we now have Enlightened Tutor for Crucible. So we've got the ability next turn to go Wasteland, so Tutor for Strip, and the next turn, or for Crucible, which will replay Strip Mine. And then we go Wasteland your land, play Crucible, replay Strip Mine your land. And that should be enough of a setback that the opponent is not going to recover. However, the opponent, maybe sensing it, runs in Explosive Vegetation, completely tapping out. And if you tap out against the Winter Orb.deck, the card that you're going to be facing very shortly is Winter Orb, of course. So we'll go ahead and plus up here, and don't quite have enough mana here to do like Winter Orb and Teferi on the same turn, but Teferi can come down next turn. And so the opponent's going to get to untap once, and then we're going to have a Teferi running under a Winter Orb, and there's just no recovery. There's probably no recovery from the orb itself, as the opponent realizes, but it's going to be super brutal once Teferi hits. So the opponent gives up there. So the commander did a little bit for us there, but not as much as it will later. All right, so we got a game against Cougar-Bait. And I believe we'll play this person more than once. Keepable hand. We've got this person's playing Yisan, so this person's playing a serious commander. The Yisan the Wandering Bard is a major threat, right? First turn Elf, second turn Isan, and then you can start setting up basically a combo, and very quickly the game just snowballs out of control and you win. It's one of the most abusive commanders actually around in green. It probably is the most abusive. I know Brian plays Omnath, and Omnath is a lot of fun, but I think he plays Omnath because Isan is such nonsense that even I think he doesn't feel it's interesting or particularly challenging to abuse the card. But having said that, of course, I have no issues with it. I'm just pointing that out because this is going to represent a much more challenging game potentially here. But this is a great opening hand. We've got second turn Tomb, so we can get one of these 3-drops into play. Ideally, the person does something like play a Soul Ring, and then we just go land, Coalition Relic, Vandal Blast. If they don't, I get to go land, probably pass, but possibly Relic, charge. The thing is, we want to kind of keep the remand up for Isan, so it kind of depends on if the opponent has, like, say, a first turn Mana Elf. Just keeping Isan out of play is pretty important, so a lot of questions about how this works out. But as it turns out, the opponent has the insane Soul Ring draw, which should be the nuts with Isan, but in this particular case is playing right into our hands. So we go and get a Hallowed Fountain there, and then run out Coalition Relic and immediately blow it up. Opponent floats 2 mana for some reason. Doesn't cycle anything. Not sure what that's all about. All right, so we pass the turn doing great. Up 4 mana to 1. And hopefully... Oh, and then Strip Mine on Ancient Tomb brings us back down to reality here. That's fine. And do not top deck a land there. So the thought process is what to do next. Ended up deciding on Demonic Tutor for Mishra's Workshop. So we could play Crucible. The Workshop's safe, and that gets us set up for our Commander, which means if we do play the Commander, we can just go get Strip Mine, and we've got Crucible Strip. All right, opponent's on 2 mana here. Plays an Elvish Mystic. Plays a Root Maze, which is going to be annoying and problematic. Artifacts and lands enter the battlefield tapped. So we'll go ahead and play tapped Ancient Tomb and decide, you know what, we've got Impulse here. Let's pass for the turn and we'll be all right. And the next turn we can use Fabricate, and play something off the Workshop perhaps. Opponent plays the tapped Guy's Cradle, goes for Isan, and we were sitting on remand to buy some time. So go ahead and remand that guy back to hand. Opponent ends with 4 cards in hand. All right, so this time we're going to go ahead and play Golos. And Golos is going to come into play tapped and fetch a tapped Strip Mine. And replay a fetch land from the graveyard, cast Imperial Seal, and pass. So no, we could preordain and decide to do it. We're going to go ahead and put the card that we sealed for into hand and tuck the other card. So we'll see a new card next turn. Root Maze is particularly punishing against decks that aren't monocolor because you use a lot of fetch lands, and fetch lands come into play tapped, and then when you untap them and crack them, the land you get comes into play tapped, so it sets you back like multiple turns. Fortunately, of course, we knew that Isan was going to be showing up to the party there based on the fact that we had just remanded it. Post-combat, we'll go ahead and clear. Use a strip, play a tapped Strip Mine, because we can't Strip Mine again here because Root Maze is getting in the way. But at this point, my opponent's Guy's Cradle isn't doing anything. Their Caverns is, of dubious value right there. And if the opponent has like a 3-drop and plays land, it's going to come into play tapped. So I'm not going to be able to use it. I can Windswept Heath at the end of their turn for a tapped land, and then I cannot cast Impulse due to the interaction with Root Maze, as I was saying. Super brutal. So, tough deck that actually turns out to be, Soul Ring, Strip Mine, Root Maze, very good stuff with fast mana. And one of the most terrifying green commanders, and we trivially defeat it with this deck, which is a very good sign. All right, so next game after Cougar Bait was Schultz Cubed. Correction, I'm actually jumping ahead. I'm gonna back up. 5 Killer Bad Stuff showed up, and we played a couple of games against him, and I believe Brian was piloting these. And I'm trying to remember what happened. And I think in one of them, he actually showed up with a Golos mirror match, and Brian said something about like not being interested in playing. Yeah, that's what it was. He messaged him and said like, "Hey, look, I really don't want to play a mirror match against Golos. Also against one of the, like it's like playing a friend in a mirror match. It just is very tedious and not interesting because we're trying to generate information about how the deck matches up when you don't know what the context of the deck are and you're not playing almost the same deck and you're not using the same philosophy. We're trying to get a sense for the general value of the deck before like diving deep into those specific corner cases. So 5CBS just went and said, hey, no problem. He scooped for that game, so it doesn't really count as a loss there, and jumped into a game in which he brought something different. And in this game, he is playing... oops. I see. I'm sorry. So I can't remember what happened. I don't remember how it ended up happening that he jumped in two, but I think that's where Brian messaged him like separately or texted him and said something about, hey, I'm trying not to do the mirror match thing. And so that was what the deal was there. So he actually ended up having to go and look for something to build to come back with, or maybe he had a break or something. But he ended up coming back much later, and there was a super interesting set of games, and we'll get to those as we work our way down, where he returned with a non-Golos deck and had, as you can see, 2-1. He's the only person to actually even win a single game against this deck. And the games were super interesting, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, another game against Cougar Pay, also playing the green deck, and as you'll see, his deck is actually designed to punish two things: blue decks and artifact decks. And guess what this is? So it's going to actually be quite tough, and he's playing Isan, of course, again, and we're still playing Golos, and we've got this opening hand, and this is a weird one because boy, if this was Mystical Teachings, this hand would be far more capable. As it is, there is a Vandal Blast, but no way to play it. There's a Vindicate. There's a Narset, but no way to play that. It's borderline, but it's also slow. And however, we won the die roll, so we decided to keep based on the fact that there might be enough time to, if he goes first turn Alpha, we go second turn Land, and he goes second turn Yisan, we go third turn Vindicate the Yisan. So because there's an answer to Yisan early, ended up keeping it. An opponent runs out Ancient Tomb into Null Rod, and it's like, thank goodness we didn't mulligan to a quote-unquote fast hand with a bunch of artifact ramp, because this would have been devastating, right? As it is, it's just super annoying. All right, so turn 2, Urborg, pass here. Got a Druid Impulse, was really nice there, so we can impulse past artifacts in this case, and look for mana-based land and other interaction. All right, so Null Rod against this deck, though, should be pretty brutal. So we're going to Impulse in response, just in case it changes the decision matrix of what we want to do here. End up picking up a red source, which is cool because we can actually VB the Null Rod, Vandal Blast, VB. So that's an option, but the first things first, we've got to get Isan off the board, or else it's just going to start the chain of nonsense that's going to kill us. So we'll go ahead and make that play. Tapped out again, a situation you just don't want to be in the control deck, but it will happen, and you certainly have to be able to deal with it. So opponent runs out of Finhorn Elf and plays a land drop, so they're right on track to play Isan once again. And we top deck a Jace, which is fantastic here. So we're going to go get a island, and there's no real pressure on us, so now's the time to get Jace down and go ahead and just dig. We find a Force of Will, very, very timely. That'll take care of another Isan, or if the opponent has an opportunity here to make a punishing play here, like a Plow Under or something, we can address it. All right, so they run out. You have Maya Hollow and Llanowar Tribe, a 3/3 for 3 that taps for 3. So a Gilded Lotus on a body. It's gross, but we're not going to Force of Will it. Instead, we'll draw some cards, find a land, and play a 3/5 who can block. So the opponent has a ton of mana, but this now ramps us up heavily using mana instead of artifacts. So we can't use his ability yet, but we're actually not that far off from doing it. And in the meantime, um, we're doing exactly what this deck wants to do, which is ramp, right? Always, always, always want to ramp and control. We still have the Force of Will up, which is good because the opponent has, what is that, 6, 8, 9, 10, 10 mana over there, so very scary. Goes for a Green Sun Zenith. We decide to force, and the opponent has Veil of Summer. So let me run you through the thought process. We go for a Green Sun Zenith for 3, X equals 3, and we force because we don't want Golos to die, and then Jace dies from an attack from the Llanowar tribe. And it's worth Force of Willing for that. So we Force of Will with Narset because Narset, it doesn't look like the opponent's necessarily drawing a lot of cards, and we have other things to do. Muddle transmutes for Demonic Tutors, so we're not going to do that. Tezzeret gets Vedalken Shackles, which will protect us against Yisan, so we're not going to trash that. Or it gets Crucible when we already have Strip Mine and we can start that. So for all those reasons, we selected Narset, and the opponent has main deck Veil of Summer to go with main deck Null Rod, right? And then fetches not just Artifact Destruction, but we were thinking it would be the 2/1 Elf, but no, Manglehorn, which will destroy the artifact and force artifacts to come into play tapped, which is brutal, which means we can't like recast Golos and block, even if we had a reason to. But it's also going to punish anything like mana vault, for example, or any of that stuff. So, and kills Jace, and the opponent drew a card off Veil of Summer. Super gross. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and Vandal Bless that Null Rod and play Arcane Signet here. And play a Strip Mine and make a little mistake here, not thinking about it, getting a little bit aggressive. We were talking with each other and not super focused like we should have been. And we did not leave 2 blue mana up. So now the opponent gets to run out Yisan, and we still have a big problem here. And the reason we didn't leave 2 blue mana up is because we made the Vandal Blast play in the wrong order. So I'm going to pause. So what we needed to do is Vandal Blast the Null Rod and then play the Arcane Signet. And then we have 2 blue up. But what we actually did was play the Arcane Signet and then Vandal Blast the Null Rod. Oh, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered because we weren't paying attention to Manglehorn. So the Signet, yes, the Signet will work once the Null Rod's gone, but it's coming in play tap from Manglehorn. So we weren't thinking that through. So it was just a screw up, I think, actually. So anyway, on our turn, now we've got to fix our screw up. So we're gonna transmute Muddle here for Demonic and DT. This was always the plan, right? Go ahead and get Toxic Deluge. And then I was talking with Brian. I was like, okay, we Deluge. And he's like, no, actually, I think that what we do is we sit on a counter so that we don't get our back broken by a major play like Tooth and Nail. Otherwise, we just let him invest a little more. We use our life total, and then next turn we can deluge very comfortably with lots of mana left over, as opposed to deluging now and being tapped out and having him potentially follow up with something like a Planeswalker or something nasty. I was like, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. I think he totally had the call. And the thought was that although he has an active ESON, he can only use it for 1 right now, and so a 1-drop, the most likely 1-drop he is to get, there were 2 when we were discussing it. One was Sylvan, the Sylvan Ranger who you sack a land to make a creature untargetable, and the second one was the guy who lets you return an elf to, I think it's return a creature to your hand or return an elf to your hand to untap target creature. And we're thinking, okay, well that will let the opponent like sneak a creature out from under, like to hide a creature from Toxic Deluge, but that's still worth it. And the opponent might aggressively search right here, and if the opponent aggressively searches, then we don't have to worry about it with Deluge. Otherwise, if they do the pickup play, we've got Tezzeret counterspell. We can take care of it on the way down. So we just decided to go this route. Opponent runs out Sylvan Scrying into Cavern of Souls and passes, which is unfortunate. But we're going to go ahead and play Tezzeret here, and then once again make the mistake of doing Order Lull, Tezzereting, not deluging, and so we don't get Encrypt to pay for this deluge. We had to deluge there and then Tezzeret. There may have been no way to do it, honestly, and still leave a counter up, but we could have actually fetched, I don't know, I feel like there was something, we definitely like kind of dorked that up a little bit. What we could have done was like probably Tezzeret, Deluge, and then instead of fetching Crypt, just untap the Signet and not fetched for the turn, and then had counter magic up. So we're shields down once again due to there may have been, I will or will not confess that there may have been some drinking going along with the gaming nights as well. And then we make a huge misplay. So the opponent plays root maze. So this is a series of cluster like screw ups, right? The opponent plays root maze. We don't fetch in response. And so after the root maze resolves, we then fetch Mystic Sanctuary. Like, okay, that's fine. We'll just go get Sanctuary, and then we'll put Vindicate on top, and then we'll just Vindicate, Tribe Down or Root Mage, whatever we want to kill. Probably whatever. I think we're going to Vindicate the. I think we were going to Vindicate the Snow-Covered Forest with the Wild Growth on it, and then leave the opponent with like low on mana, and then tutor for like Shackles and call it good. Problem is, something I explained in the other video is that Mystic Sanctuary does not trigger because you have 3 islands. Mystic Sanctuary comes in untapped because you have 3 islands. Mystic Sanctuary triggers when it comes into play untapped. And what that means is if it comes into play tapped for some other reason, it doesn't trigger. So it does not trigger on, for example, Golos putting it into play tapped, regardless of how many islands you have. And it doesn't trigger if there's a root maze and forcing it to come into play tapped, regardless of how many islands. So no Vindicate for us. So another screw up, not fetching in response. But we were having a good night and hanging out, and mistakes were made. And the funny thing about that is that this deck is good enough that it just didn't matter all that much. We go ahead and untap Golos and Arcane Signet there, and we still have defenses for Tezzeret. And use Golos to fetch out a Mishra's Workshop. And so we're going to go with the, we have a commander plan who does broken stuff. All right, so opponent goes for a Bane of Progress main deck to go along with their Veil of Summer and Null Rod and all this stuff, Manglehorn. I love this opponent's deck. Super, super ridiculous deck. Like, it is so anti this deck, right? We got him. And then next turn, of course, we get to activate Golos. And we have to go to town here, and the opponent gives up. So, interesting game. A little bit of not all brain cells were firing, and we still managed to win and do pretty well, all things considered. Even against a Veil of Summer, Null Rod, and Manglehorn. So I was like very, very impressed at this point by the deck's resiliency and ability to play, that's a good sign. Like, that's what you want to see. Even when you face hosers, you want your deck to be able to bounce back. So we have a game now against Schultz Cubed. And talk about resiliency. I can't wait to show you the game that came up. And here you can see we've got the Ori draw. I'm playing against Moldotha, the Gravetide, which is a pretty sick commander. It's going to let you snowball out of control by playing cards from your graveyard at 6 mana. And we decided to keep a 1-land hand with like a 7-drop in it, which seems crazy, right? But take a look at how we play this out. So we're going first also. But we play 1 land and pass. Opponent plays, I think they get a fast start as well, if I remember correctly. But I may not remember correctly. I guess they didn't. All right, plays first turn forest, and we mystical tutor for, hopefully you got the answer, Tithe. So we tutor for 2 lands. So we're still slow here, but we're at least like going now. All right. So we've managed to hit, basically we hit a land drop and a land drop. Cost us a tutor. We're down some cards, but we're still in the game. Opponent gets a turn 2 Signet. Yeah, starts picking up the pace over there. On our end, we're going to get a turn 2. I believe we're just going to run out the Power Stone here. Yeah. So we've jumped up from 3 to 5 mana, which also turns on the commander. And then the commander can go get Ancient Tomb, and we can play Ori. However, the opponent then plays a Signet and a land and passes. And I think we decide to just go for it here and do something a little different because we draw Force of Will. So because we draw Force of Will, we then run out Monolith and copy the Monolith and then play the Ori on 7. And the opponent has a mana drain. And we Force of Will the mana drain and it lands. Boom, Ori hits. casts the commander. Commander hits, goes and gets a strip mine, and we now have the ability to tap for obscene amounts of mana, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus this is 11. And if we untap these guys, we can get up to 17 mana to our opponent's 5, and we've got a strip mine. Plus, we can use all this colorless mana to activate Golos. Opponent tutors, and we're like, oh no, what does he have? This is going to be bad. And gets an Oko. So we cannot activate Golos. So this is a way for the opponent to get back in the game. This is really suddenly quite rough. So what we have to do is use Ori's other ability and draw a card for each color of permanent we control. We currently control one green creature, so we get to draw exactly one card. And then deciding not to counterspell here because the opponent's probably going to hit the Ori with the Oko, so our counterspell was not castable once they do that. We decided to strip mine instead, and the opponent mystical tutors for a vampiric tutor. Strange choice instead of demonic. They do in fact hit the Ori. We do get to finish off Oko, but now we've kind of used up a lot of our juice, right? That was a big play that we went in for. Unfortunately, our two top decks were Counterspell and Tezzeret. So we're going to try to use the Counterspell to protect the Tezzeret on the way down and see what that does for us. Opponent Vampiric tutors at the end of the turn and goes for Thassa's Oracle, and it turns out they're playing this garbage combo here. I say garbage. It's actually super, super good. The problem with this combo is it's like incredibly mind-numbingly easy to pull off in Commander, and so therefore I don't really care for it. I do not know why Thassa's Oracle is legal in Commander, or for that matter, Demonic Consultation, honestly, because I believe Deranged Hermit is not legal, or it is legal, but Deranged Hermit has a run-up, right? You play the 1 mana Hermit, you can't play with any basic lands, then you activate him on the next turn and you exile your deck. Demonic Consultation is an instant for 1 black. That's quite different from a 2 mana 1/1 creature that has to be used on the next turn. I think Hermit is almost too good, and there's certainly room for a Hermit Consult deck. But how boring. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. However, it does exist. So anyway, opponent puts Consult on the stack. Puts Oracle on the stack and casts Consult. And then what they'll do is they'll exile cards from they exile the top 6 cards from their library and then reveal cards from their library until they reveal a card with the chosen name, put that into their hand, and exile all the cards revealed this way. Well, what they'll do is they'll name a card like Abandon Hope that they're not actually playing in their deck. And then once they do that, their whole deck is exiled. Then the Thassa's Oracle resolves. They look at the top X cards of their library, where X is their devotion to blue, so the top 2 cards of their empty library. They put one of them on top, the rest on the bottom, and then if X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you win the game. So if looking at the top X cards of their library exceeds the number of cards in their library, they win. So in this case, they look at 2 cards of a library that has 0. 2 is bigger than 0, so they instantly win the game. Super, super stupid. Fortunately, we do have the counterspell for the Consult. And the opponent's pretty low here on cards themselves. Only 1 card in hand. All right, so we're going to untap the Grim and slam Tezzeret and slam Crucible and go ahead and strip away their mana. And at that point, the opponent just gives up. They're down to only 4 mana, 1 card in hand. Their combo was prevented. We leave these blockers back. We're going to untap a Grim Monolith at the end of their turn. We've got tons of mana to work with. Can start beating them in the face with the 3/3. The 3/3 commander here will beat face, but we're going to leave them both back for now so that if the opponent had removal, they would not be able to kill the blocker and kill the Tezzeret. So Tezzeret's also going to do his thing, and yeah, the game's over. Gross, nasty, but something we can deal with. All right, Fiery Temper, next opponent. Fiery_Temper is playing Taurand, which also can be quite tough and a little bit unfun just by the... it's a little bit of the fun police because it's just like play counter, 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 counter. Here I am saying fun police though, and I'm playing, a deck with Winter Orb and Mind Twist, but such is the way of things. Anyway, get a great first turn involving a Mox Diamond and a Ponder, and decide not to Imperial Seal here because the next card is good, which I believe is just a land. It's exactly what we want. Opponent runs out of Sapphire Medallion, which is tough because now it's going to be very hard to win a counter war with the discounted counter spells over there. But it does open the door up for potentially playing Oko here. We decided not to play the Oko and instead tutor with the Imperial Seal and just sit on the mana drain. So what we're hoping is that the opponent just goes land and runs their commander directly into the mana drain and loses. Instead, they go for As Foretold. We're going to try to mana drain it. They've got a counter spell for 1 mana. Dang it. Frustrating, because Containment's going to be super hard to do against an As Foretold and a Sapphire Medallion. Did go get a Workshop, so we're going to run the shop into Commander, and then use the Commander to go get a Urborg, which is going to make the Workshop produce an extra black. So we basically, when we need it, we have the extra mana for that. We're actually really close to Golos being active as well. We're not too far off anyway. We need two more mana sources, and we need 1 more color. But by doing this, we actually have the ability to potentially set up a demonic for necro type situation. All right, so we can get in some damage. As Foretold, ticking up, all quite scary. I'm going to go ahead and demonic tutor and see what the opponent does about it. And there's Mana Crypt, which is the 2 extra mana we would need to activate Golos. The only thing we're missing now is just a single color, and that would give us end of turn activations, which should be, or even main phase, which should be good enough, right? The opponent plays Talrand. We could force a negation if it were not a creature, but we cannot do that against a creature. We top deck a Dak Faden. Going to go ahead and swing in now before they get a chance to make a flyer off of potentially countering a spell here, and then go for Winter Orb, and the opponent gives up. Amazingly, so the Winter Orb was actually bait here. It wasn't intended to be. The goal here was to get Oko down and turn Talrand into a 3/3, and then slowly recover from there. It would have been nice to, like, ideally what happens here is Winter Orb resolves, we cast Dak Faden, and we steal Sapphire Medallion, and we play Oko. But there's actually not enough blue on this side of the table to do all that. So the other choice was just, we actually threw the Winter Orb down as bait here in order to see if we could get the opponent to counterspell that, and then we could potentially slam Oko and ding the Talrand. But the opponent actually, because they conceded to this, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we were actually in a much worse spot than it looked like we were in. I'm really surprised that the opponent conceded with both Sapphire and As Foretold. Had it been me, I certainly would not have in their position, but who knows? Who knows what was in their hand? So yeah, we'll take it. So Fiery Temper is Bales, and we end up facing low tier. I think that was premature scoop. We were both kind of surprised to see it. We just really thought that was starting a counter war. Actually, we're not going to fight over it either. We were not going to try to counter back. Anyway, this opponent's playing Joda, Archmage Eternal, and we have a hand that is utterly insane, or we get to go first turn Golos if we want to. Decide not to run that out just yet. We're going to play 2 extra mana sources and then play Golos. And the opponent scoops. Like, this is an insane start. Something you could never do with Brea, of course. But with this commander you can. So boom, 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 boom. We actually have 2 colors of the 5. So, but we were not going to go get, like, the rest of our colors. We were going to go get Strip Mine here. And then next turn we Strip Mine, copy the Talisman, and then Imperial Seal for Crucible. And then the turn after that, use the Workshop to play Crucible and start, and then Strip Lock is in place. And that's how fast Golos can put it into place, which is just amazing. All right, next game was against JK22. If it fires. And this opponent is playing Kaikar Wind's Fury, which is interesting. We've got a very, very acceptable hand, very solid. anytime you get to start with a tutor is usually pretty good. Sorry, I'd gotten a text message. Okay, so opponents, we fetched for Crypt, of course, because we're holding Urza. I don't even have to look. I just know. And you should probably, if you're a viewer for a little while, you surely know. But then the opponent played that Talisman. If we decide not to run out Urza, instead to play Ready and start ticking it up, because what this means, if the opponent goes land commander, we just kill it on is dead on arrival. And if they don't make any plays, then we kill their Talisman. So this is much better for pressuring the opponent. And we can get around to Urza later. There's a really sweet interaction, of course, between Urza and Duretti, in which your Duretti is just spitting out Mox Sapphires for Urza. It's a tap for mana. So things were looking really good. And the funny thing is we had all 5 colors, and we had all the mana to activate. We can use Golos with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is, and then Urza taps this for blue, 7. So blue, red, black, green, white, or however, white, green, plus 2. We actually had all the mana to activate the commander right there in play. And pressure on the opponent, and they just scoop. Anyway, Ars Tot, I don't know about this name. Arstotska is the next opponent, I believe, and doesn't want to play us. Okay, didn't realize that was not a game. I wouldn't waste the time trying to figure out how to say the name. And then JK22 does jump into another game with us, and I think also scoops. I don't know if they were just jumping in because thinking maybe we had a different deck or something. I think he scoops here. Maybe not, though. Same thing, playing Kaikar. They run out first turn, land, and pass. Nice hand with the Swords to Plowshares against a commander that wants to sit and play. Doesn't have, like, the funny thing about Golos is you play him and get mana, and then you're hoping they kill him so that you can get more mana, right? It's a commander that really punishes your opponent for doing what should be the correct play for them is actually wrong. Look at this. This is funny. The exact same Talisman opponent has in game 2. And counterspell pickup there real nice. We now have the ability to both swords and muddle or swords and counter. And really just hoping to chill out and get an opportunity to sneak a Jace out next turn. So hoping things go that way. Meantime, we're sitting on a counter to, protect against Jace, for example. Opponent does play that. And we just go for plow and it sticks. Cool. All right. So easiest Jace in my life here. We're going to go ahead and do that and pass. On an empty board, it's just such a terrible feeling when you're not the person who has the Jace on an empty board like that. Opponent then runs out a Daxos Blessed by the Sun. So they're going to be gaining some life. And then a 2-1 Flyers. They actually have got some pressure now for Jace. So board is empty no further. I'm going to go ahead and play a land here and just throw out a Teferi, I believe. A Golos. Right. Generate some more mana. Grab an Ancient Tomb, right? Use plus up Jace. And then this way, if they remove Golos and attack with both, Jace still lives. If we had a minus Jace to bounce one of their guys and they killed Golos, then Jace would die, right? Because it'd be on 2. And the opponent plays Impact, Tremors, and Path to Exile. We don't have any basic lands, so we get nothing. And then the opponent's able to attack Jace and take it to 1, exactly as predicted. Impact, Tremors doesn't... I didn't even read the card, honestly, but I'll take a look at it in a second. Anyway, our turn, we get to run out of Thran Dynamo. And of course, Golos has provided additional mana to make all this work out quite nicely. A Teferi, draw a card, Merchant Scroll for Force of Will. And we use Jace on 0. And basically, Jace is going to die here. I understand that. But it's totally fine because at this point, we don't need any more extra cards off of him. We've got Counterspell, Force of Will with Copy Artifact, and a Necropotence to refuel, which will be even better. And tons of mana over here. So opponent attacks. Instead of killing Jace, chooses to send both on Teferi, which makes no sense at all. So we just plus up Jason, plus up Teferi, and run out Talisman here along with Golos. Fetching another land. And you can see how like just totally obscene Golos is here. We're now going to untap the strip mine that we fetched, I believe. Yep. And go ahead and strip their command tower and pass. Funny, you can copy the Golos here. Like if we wanted, we could copy artifact the Golos and just go get a land. Even though we would have to sacrifice one of them. Opponent goes for their commander, you just counterspell it. Because it produces extra flyers when they play non-creature spells, and we don't really want to deal with extra flyers. And now the opponent's just giving up. They have the ability here to send the Selfless Spirit in and kill the Teferi that they wanted dead from earlier, but I think they realize that the game is way out of control now. And with Golos on board, we can actually start ultimating him. We don't even need... We're both Necro and Sylvan and don't need to play either one to win this game, and that's how crazy this deck is. All right. So after JK22, the next opponent was Polka Broker. Because you can have some of the most powerful enchantments ever printed and be like, it's fine. All right, and this opponent's playing red, green, white partners, and we've got a super good draw here, so we'll see how that works out. And we get first turn Soul Ring, something that is even more insane in this deck than it is in other control decks that we've built, because Golos is 5 colorless and basically is an acidic slime for a land the turn after he comes into play, since you can usually just jam him and go grab a strip mine. All right, well, that changes things real nicely. We're going to go turn 2 Urza. Although counter magic is down, development is up. This is totally worthwhile. Very hard to kill Urza, and it's going to make our commander produce mana. So if the opponent doesn't do anything too crazy here, he just runs out a 5/4 with no abilities at all, which is really good in block or limited, but not so much in commander. We're going to go ahead and fetch and just run out, I believe, the commander right here. And fetch a strip mine. And now we've got a remand up because the construct and the Golos can tap for blue, which is great. Opponent will get to, hit us for 5 here, but it's not too big of a deal. Drops us to 34. Nature's Lore is not going to get countered despite the fact that we're interested in strip mining the opponent. It's not that important. We're not going to waste we're not going to force him to put it back in his hand and recast it. It's not going to get us anywhere. All right, so this turn we're going to run Golos' ultimate, and we hit Karn, Crucible, and then a Force of Negation. And because we hit a Crucible, we get a strip mine here, so this Karn still isn't Mystical Teachings. And look at how much better it would have been if it was Teachings. Karn, okay, whatever. If this were Teachings right now, we would have just Teachinged for a Force of Will in hand and had this whole thing going with a Force of Will in hand. So once again, Karn not quite doing the job that I want him to do in this deck. But yeah, we actually activated Golos there, and you got to see how insane it is. Basically, we activated him and won the game, putting Crucible Lock into play. So, good stuff. Strip lock. Eventually, right? All right, so now we got a Kalia player here, and this Kalia player was a bad sport. I think we ended up blocking him. Started doing a bunch of whining and complaining and started building games and saying End Project 2 is a bad person and should feel bad, and I don't know, stuff like that. Anyway, whatever. But the opponent is playing Golos, and so are we. So I thought this would be actually really interesting, and I was super excited to face a potential mirror match that wasn't somebody who was, a buddy of the channel who knows the exact ins and outs. Brian didn't really want to play a mirror match. I think I ended up playing these games against Kalia, or this game against Kalia, for the most part. Anyway, and it's not there's not a crazy start going on over here. It's pretty slow on both ends. Watery Graves for the two of us. But it leads off with a Sylvan Library, and now it's oh geez, they've got a Sylvan. This is not good, because now the opponent can draw up to 3 cards per turn for quite a while before anything happens. And remember, there's no disenchant in this deck. The correct answer there would have been just tutor, disenchant, and go. We can't do it. So we're going to have to try to out-mana the opponent to make up for the fact that we can't out-card the opponent. If this opponent hits a bunch of mana on their Sylvan, then that's not going to work either. But maybe we can get enough mana where we can start using Golos, and then we can catch up on cards. So a lot of maybes and hopes right here, but Sylvan has a way of dashing said hopes. Opponent has all lands that produce blue too, so it's just not looking great. We're out the Crypt here, and opponent has Force of Will for it using Omniscience. So it is a full-on combo deck. We're going to run Trinket Mage out. It does land, so we get to play Soul Ring here. Opponent then Enlightened Tutors for a Crucible of Worlds. So we're like, okay, great. They're going to set up Strip Lock with Golos. So pretty brutal start from the opponent, but hey, that's what we're here for. Awesome games. We can still play our commander next turn if we want to. And then runs out Rhystic Study instead of doing anything with the Crucible. So Study's very annoying, but we can play around it reasonably well. So we'll play Soul Ring and pay the cost. Fetch with Windswept Teeth prior to having the Rhystic Study on the stack. Run out a Coalition Relic and pay the cost. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do like the whole Golos thing because we had lost 2 mana to Rhystic Study this turn, but we can at least attack and develop. And then opponent has another tutor, a Worldly Tutor, getting Azusa, Lost but Seeking. So they've got Azusa, they've got Crucible, they're going to go crazy here. And they've got their commander. They can start going Strip Mine, Strip Mine, Strip Mine 3 times per turn. It's going to be totally gross. There's Azusa, land, Vesuva. No Crucible. Vesuva comes into play tapped, so we've got a little tiny bit of time left. So what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to fabricate, pay the price, and go get Winter Orb. And the opponent scoops. So despite the fact that he's all set up, drawing extra cards off Sylvan Library, and is all set up with Azusa, Crucible, and of course the commander to get Strip Mine, and strip 3 lands per turn, the opponent dies to the power of the bear, and then gets tilted. I think did he play this the second time? This Kalia player, yeah. I noticed a distinct lack of Kalia in these games too, I might add. Yeah, did we actually play a second game? Yeah, did jump into a second game, I guess to get revenge or whatever. And leads off with Skyshroud Ranger, which will let him put extra lands into play per turn. This opponent's really got to think for lands here. We're going to run out Wintry Grave, Mana Crypt into Talisman, and pass with a Mana Drain up. So remember that essentially can be a 3-drop or a 4-drop, depending on if they put Ancient Tomb into play or what. And they do exactly that. But just use the Thespian Sage to copy the tomb. So the opponent went from 1 mana to 6 on the next 1 mana. They put 4 into play that turn. They'll have another land and possibly another land up to 7 mana on the next turn. Meanwhile, we just drew a tap Mystic Sanctuary and have to be done. So opponent is going crazy over there, but we fortunately have a high mana draw here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana ourselves. And yeah, look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana on the opponent's side of the board, and goes for a Wheel of Fortune effect. We thankfully have this mana drain. The opponent scoops it up and then goes on tilt and spams that we're bad people or something. Crazy stuff. It was really funny. I actually got a text from 5-Color Bad Stuff going, wow, I've never seen anyone tilt like that. He was like this player, Kalia player was, I'm trying to remember what he said exactly because it made me chuckle. He says, bro, you and Brian did a serious number on Kalia player. I've never seen End Project 2 called out in the main lobby before, and they had some laughing faces. So we had a laugh about it, but I mean, it was poor sportsmanship. Anyway, Sharks 58 UK, 58 UK is the next opponent. And this player is running a Tatiova Bentic Druid, and we've got a great start here, except for one thing. So I want to back up again. I'm going to replay that fresh. I want you to take a look at this hand. want to emphasize something. This is a keep with 0 land and a 7 drop, right? 0 land, 7 drop, and I want you to see how fast we get this chromatic Ori into play. All right. So turn 1, we get to run out a mana crypt into Expedition map, but we can't crack the map because we don't have any lands. So we're just done against a blue-green deck. And if any of this, if the opponent just like goes Nature's Claim here, we're sunk, right? I mean, it would be it would be pretty devastating. Anyway, turn 2. Opponent sends a message. I can't remember what it was. All right, got nothing. Turn 2, we're going to crack, fetch Mishra's Workshop, and pass. So turn 1, no lands. Turn 2, don't play a land. We don't want it to get wastelanded. Opponent plays a land and passes. Our turn 3. We get to go land commander, which means we can get colored mana finally. And we choose not to. Get an Ancient Tomb. So turn 3, we play Workshop Ancient Tomb. And suddenly it's like we hit land on turn 1 and turn 2 because we've hit both of our land drops. We only skipped one on turn 3 essentially. And turn 4, we actually have 7 mana now. And we have Fierce Guardianship with our commander in play. So we can run this Ori out. And even if the opponent has a counter spell, we can counter back. Which is just obscene, by the way. I think Fierce Guardianship was a horrible mistake. They have a Growth Spiral. We're not going to counter that. They go get a Simic Growth Chamber. Super cool thing. And now we can actually tap for 5 mana. So let's get to work. And we can make 5 colorless and spend it however we want. And I think that bugs the game out. I don't think the game is equipped to handle this. Yeah, I don't think the game's equipped to handle this in the replays. But the bottom line is, I think we played like Oko, Make a Dude, Impulse or something. But basically, like, the game's over. We have all colorless mana. We skipped a land drop for 2 turns and kept a no-land hand. And even so, we went turn 3 Chromatic Ori, thanks to the power of Golos, or turn 4. And then with the Ori, we can play, we now have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana that will produce anything we want. We can play our whole hand, easily. How insane is that? And that's something you could never do with Brea, right? Like, that hand was, I mean, I guess we could have gone, like, Crypt into map into land, Enlightened Tutor for some other land, and like work it and eventually get there. But look at how straightforward and simple that was with Golos, and then the power of this crazy Ori. And this is what I was saying about, this is why Ori is in this deck and not in the Brea deck, because this deck really, really wants to get Workshop all the time. And then Workshop feeding into Golos allows you to get the other 2 mana to get Ori down. So there's a curve where you fetch Shop, Golos for Tomb, for Ori. And this game actually was representative of exactly the game plan that we had like drawn up before we actually ever saw it happen. So I thought that was super cool. Anyway, so there's this game against Resin now. And the other thing about that hand was that we had the green-red and the green-blue Planeswalker, and we were gonna be able to get those into play pretty easily. And then from there, we could actually not necessarily activate the. We didn't have to activate Golos. We could just activate the Ori itself and draw like 3 cards per turn, 3 extra cards per turn or something like that, which would have been just fine and totally gross, rather than drawing and casting. And sometimes it's better to draw because if you draw counter magic and stuff, or if you hit 2 lands, it can be better. So either way, we have this game here is against Resin running Fennex, God of Deception, going first, and we're on a mulligan, and he's got a blazingly fast start and gets a Mind Crank out. So whenever we lose life, we have to mill cards. Oop, and there goes our Tundra. Ouch. But we do manage to Vandal Blast. We had a first turn Vandal Blast, so we kept, and along with some good mana, and the Vandal Blast pays off because we're able to kill Mana Crypt. And I remember Brian was playing this one, and he said, he said, this Vandal Blast is great because if he has Crypt or Soul Ring, we're going to need this. And then, sure enough, we were able to fire it off. Look at that. We just lost our Tundra and our Underground Sea both. And we lose our Demonic Tutor and our Copy Artifact, but we get Grim Monolith down and pass. So although we're throwing cards away in the graveyard for Mind Crank, we are also fueling up a potential Yawgmoth's Will. And the opponent misses a land drop here. They kept on the strength of Crypt and everything, and they give up. And it's super amazing. So it was like, wow, that's a game that felt like we could have been in a lot of trouble off the mulligan and everything against the Crypt. And then it just worked out beautifully. So I thought that was pretty cool. And now I'm going to save the games against 5-color bad stuff. I'm going to hit these last, we'll go ahead and run through those. And then we'll just run through those, and then we'll do the Turbo Bird and the MEP 637 game, and then we'll call it good. So 3 games here. We played a 3-game set and managed to win 2-1. But here's the first loss that we experienced during the course of testing. I don't know if it was this game or the next. We're playing against Nin the Paint Artist, run by 5-color bad stuff. So he is running something very close to Brian's list, which means that Brian knows most of what to expect, but it also means that it has all of the time that Brian's put into building the deck behind it, and it's going to make this much harder because 5CBS is a good player, and even if he made changes, the changes he made will most likely be, in fact, all will be, well thought out changes that will improve the deck. Or if they don't improve the deck, they're going to be like lateral changes that like it could be argued, that kind of stuff. So it should be really challenging. However, we got the draw that Nin never wants to see, which is early Soul Ring, and then we cloned the Soul Ring, so double Soul Ring. Nin does not want to be dealing with this at all. This is the one somewhat of a weakness for the Nin deck, is just really fast rocketing mana starts where you don't have the same on the other side of the board. But he does have Mana Crypt to catch up, so all of a sudden, in a Gilded Lotus, all of a sudden, that big advantage we had, just like that, it's gone. So we'll charge the Relic here, and we want the next card, I believe. Yeah, so we're not going to actually shuffle with Tithe. We'll Tithe afterwards, grab a couple lands. Go for a Teferi, and it sticks. Bounce the Lotus for tempo. And then run out Golos and go get a Strip Mine here, I believe. Yep. We're trying to get tempo going. We've got Renin 6 and a Strip Mine. That should be really good. If the opponent uses the opportunity to just play Gilded Lotus and doesn't do anything particularly with it, then we're in a great spot because we also are threatening to activate Golos, which is a huge problem for the opponent. So there was a massive tempo swing towards us in the beginning, then a massive tempo swing back, and then back towards us again. And now the opponent's play is Vandal Blast. Crushing. Kills the commander, 2 Soul Rings, and a Coalition Relic. Vandal Blast is typically against Brea, it is like game over on the spot. But look at this. Insane development, Vandal Blast, crush. Just gross and brutal, right? All right, so what are we going to do here? We're going to plus up Teferi, of course, but we're also going to lead off by Savine's Reclamation, copy artifact on Gilded Lotus. I don't know if you saw that, but that was a really nice play there. Play a Renin 6, pick up a Strip Mine, and call it good for now. Renin 6 is nice because it means that Nin isn't really a threat for us, and of course we're going to continue to loop the Strip Mine. Opponent does have a ton of mana over there, but if we can take Teferi up long enough without enough pressure on it, then we can potentially bounce the Lotus, and opponent amnesias us. Now, I just want you to realize we had all lands in play, and amnesia makes you discard everything but lands, so that amnesia did absolutely nothing. But just realize that this is a game where the opponent has Crypt, runs out a Gilded Lotus, right? And a Mox, Vandal Blasts our board, and Amnesia's our hand back to back, and is going to lose this game. This deck is so resilient, it's so good. Anyway, so we go ahead and Strip Mine, pick that Strip Mine up, top deck the Shackles there, but we have better things to do for now. The better thing is called Play Golos. Are we now threatening Golos' ultimate again, despite the fact that we got Vandal Blasted and lost most of our stuff just recently? And we have Sven sitting there so that if the opponent does deal with Teferi or Ren and 6, we can just put either one back into play. And this is really bad because the Nin deck is based on two things primarily. Well, three things. There's three things that make it go. One, artifact mana, which we're not really able to do anything about, but we are disrupting the opponent's mana, although he's, as you can see, ramping right back out again. Two, it runs off of counter spells, which are completely shut down by Teferi. And three, it runs off of Nin. And Ren and 6 is currently shutting that down. So even though the draw here isn't crazy good, it's pretty darn good. All right, so we're going to run out. We're going to activate Golos, and we get Grim Monolith, Force of Will, and a land. Not super exciting. We do get to play the Grim Monolith, though. We'll run the strip, pick up the strip mine effect, and we can play a free Force of Will if the opponent makes a foolish mistake like end of turn Brainstorm or something. He's not going to do that. He's not that kind of player. So those cards just get exiled for good. But now we're threatening, once again, another activation of Golos. When it does play a Coalition Relic and runs in the Pain Artist down, kind of a desperation here, I guess, to get us to stop picking up Strip Mine, right? Of course, not realizing we've been hiding the Vedalken Shackles the whole time. We'll go ahead and just ping it off with Ren and 6. We will take it, though. There are other things to do with our mana, like A, Transmute, B, Demonic Tutor, C, play Karn. Now, the Karn play here, at the time, still not Mystical Teachings. The Karn should have just been Mystical Teachings, and we would have just Demonic Tutored for Vandal Blast, and we could just Vandal Blasted everything off the board over there, and that would have been more than sufficient to win the game. We could have even done it at instant speed because we plussed up the Fairy, if we wanted to wait. We wouldn't have waited. We would have just nuked them now because we wouldn't want to let the opponent draw like a Psychonic Rift or something, or get a playoff that would potentially get him back in the game. But you get the point. So Karn here being somewhat redundant. I mean, it was cool that we played it here and everything. And we were going to play it and then all of his artifacts turn off, and then we were just going to target his crypt with the ability to make it a creature so it would die. That way, if he somehow did manage to get rid of Karn, highly unlikely, but if it happened, it'd be down a couple of mana points. But he's had enough. He's good. So we strip lock the opponent despite Vandal Blast and Amnesia, and I'm feeling really good about this deck. Game 2, however, does not go our way, as you will see. It is a 2-1-0 match. And does not go our way. We end up keeping this hand here basically because we have Karn and the opponent just leads off like this. Really, really bad news for us. And I'm going to go ahead and close chat for now. All right. And starts off with 3 mana right off the bat. Now that means that if we can get the Karn down, it's super juicy. Like it's a win basically between Karn and Orb there. But and does miss a land drop, so there is some kind of hope for us here. However, we used our fetch there, which gave him an ice target, which was really disappointing. I guess it doesn't matter because if we hadn't done that, they could have just iced. He could have just iced his own crypt and drawn a card off of that, so it really wouldn't have mattered anyway. Ice did find him excuse me. The ice did find him a land, I believe. Yeah. And then he was able to play Coalition Relic as well and run out Nin. And we are in big, big trouble. We really need to get an Ancient Crypt, Ancient Tomb, a Mana Crypt, a Vault, a Soul Ring, something. Slow Ring. We got Slow Ring. And it's worth playing here, probably. I think not playing it here was a huge mistake. I think we should have tapped out and played the Worn Power Stone. But we were trying to represent a counter. And opponent, I feel like, is this actually what happened? It doesn't feel, yeah, I guess he just kind of like lets the mana go, and then we decide that we have a game-winning play here and it's worth trying. I think this is not playing out correct. I do think we did go for Karn here. So I'm going to pause. I think we went for Karn here and it gets countered and then we lose. Or we don't go for Karn here, we do nothing, and then he draws off in the Pain Artist and we lose because he's got too many cards and too much mana. Either way, we end up losing this game. But you can see that if Karn were Mystic Teachings here, we would have played a land and done nothing. If we would have played the War and Power Stone, then on this turn we play a land and we do nothing. Then the opponent would activate an In the Pain Artist, and at the end of our turn we'd respond by Teachings for swords and plow this thing so he doesn't draw any cards. The game would completely change, right? So because this is Karn, which should be better against this draw, it's actually impossible to resolve this thing against this draw, and it ends up being worse once again. All right, so game 3. We've got to mulligan, unfortunately. We had a Sylvan Library and had to mulligan. But we have a nice start. It's a good developmental start here. And the main thing that's the best thing about it, besides having Shackles in the early mana, Shackles is a hedge against Nin, is we have a potential for a turn 2 Jace here, which is big. And basically, if Jace lands here, I mean, essentially we're going to win the game. So we are absolutely going for that against untapped 1 blue, and god dang it. Spell Pierce. That's frustrating. All right. So then the hope is he does something crazy like turn 2 Nin, in which case we just go Shackles, steal your Nin, probably win the game from there. But he's not that foolish, so I don't know how foolish he is, but I know how foolish he's not. All right, so our turn. He goes for an ice during upkeep. That seems reasonable, but we do get to play a land here, and that gives us a window to just sneak these Shackles into play, which gives us a nice safety margin against the commander. He's now got to deal with the Shackles before he can play his commander, which is pretty good. And we still have Plowshares as a follow-up if that does manage to happen. Oh, excuse me. So turn 3 goes for Trinket Mage, grabs himself a Crypt, and runs out Thought Vessel. You should note, however, the opponent does not currently have red mana, so that is something we're keeping an eye on here. So we get a Vindicate, and think about what we want to do here and decide the correct play actually is Golos and get mana. And we go ahead and get another color, so we're actually one land drop away. One land of any color would allow us to activate Golos, and we can just start winning that way. So that's one of the great things about Golos is just look at the pressure this puts on the opponent. He's got to do something or else the commander is going to win the game. And if he can't do anything, which it looks like he can't, all we have to do is draw land. And we don't. Well, we get sort of a roundabout way. So we go for Expedition Map. The opponent actually counterspells the map. And we go for a Value Will that resolves. Play a land, play a map. And we're not getting a Jace here, but we are getting set up real nicely to take his Trinket Mage, start applying pressure on him, and then now he's got the pressure of a little bit of damage coming in, but more importantly, the Golos that can be activated. And we have an Expedition Map that we can use to fetch a Strip Mine if the opponent does manage to find a mountain. Now this gets a little bit awkward if the opponent plays a land and Vandal Blasts us. So I think in hindsight, we probably should not have stolen the Trinket Mage. We should have just sacked the map to get the extra land in case the Vandal Blast went off. Fortunately, opponent does not Vandal Blast us right there. So we get to swing in, and then we can either use Expedition Map and play a land, or we can just use Golos. Of course, we're going to use Golos, play a Talisman of Creativity, and something's wrong because those weren't... We would not have passed a Cavern of Souls and a Ponder, so we're getting a little screw up in the replay. But this part did happen where the opponent did not have a solution, and we're able to Golos once again, attack, and then just use the commander over and over to beat the opponent down. I don't know what the 3 cards are that we're going to get here according to this replay because it's clearly a bugged replay. Yeah. Anyway, we use Golos over and over and we just get tons and tons of mana, and the containment just becomes absolutely impossible. We have lands everywhere. Every time we use it, we're like hitting more lands, more mana, and then finally, I think he like kills Golos at some point. We just replay him. I'm sure we got a Cavern of Souls with the map, or at some point we replay Golos. So like he can't counter the Golos, and if he kills it, like we just replay it, we get like Workshop, and we just get tons more mana. And so eventually, what ends up happening is he can't contain our mana, and he can't contain our commander, and then we just keep using it, and we bury him in the ability to play three bonus cards per turn without spending any resources from hand. And that ends up doing it, and we end up winning game 3. All right, so now something that once again Brea would not have, it wouldn't have been in any kind of position to win that way, right? Like the commander doesn't just win the game in Brea on its own, but it does in Golos. And then we now got 3 games against Turbo Bird. The commander in Brea prevents the opponent from winning the game, which is something that you very much want in Control, which is why I've been enjoying it for so long. But the only thing better than preventing the opponent from winning the game is winning the game, which is what Golos does. All right, so playing against Turbo Bird running Atris, Oracle of Half-Truths, which has like a little kind of sort of a factor fiction effect. And I've got a nut draw here, just going crazy with Workshop into Signet into Map, and of course Workshop is super good in this deck. Opponent does have a Soul Ring, but misses a land drop to go with it. We dropped like in Mox Opal. I remember Brian and I looked at each other and laughed at how just obscene this draw is. I'm going to run out Gil Lotus, play the Mox, Vindicate their, and this was Brian's insight, so I was thinking we'll Vindicate Soul Ring, and then later we'll use the map to strip his land. Brian decides that he's probably hurting most for colored mana, and we can, because he missed a land drop, we Vindicate that and take out both lands, and then the next land he plays gets strip mined by the Expedition map. The land he plays after that gets strip mined by Golos, and somewhere in there we slip out a Necropotence. And then eventually, if we want, we can Spellseeker and just kill the Soul Ring. So basically, this is ultimate suppression right here. Mana suppression gives us all the time in the world, all the cards, all the mana. Opponent gets none of that stuff. So he quickly scoops it up, and then we run into another game. But missing a land drop against this deck is just oftentimes fatal. It's not a good, not good. All right, still running with the Karn there. We have to mulligan twice to get a playable hand, and opponent is playing the same commander here. But now things are kind of sketchy looking here. But this hand has play. It could have stopped the first turn Soul Ring, for example. And it's got an early counterspell, and it can dig for mana. Hopefully we don't have to force a negation. It's a real hard force a negation if we have to get rid of either impulse or counterspell, because we're planning to sit on exactly that. Sit on counterspell and cast impulse is what we want to be doing, so we can hit more mana drops, right? And what a rip! Tithe off the top was beautiful right there. Because we can actually tithe now when the opponent plays their next land if we don't have to counter. And we can protect it with Force and Negation. And I'm perfectly willing to pitch an Impulse to protect a tithe when the whole point of impulsing was to find more mana. But we actually don't even have to there, so this is great. Look at that. We get all of our colors are in play now. We've got plenty of land drops. We've got 6 cards in hand. They've got 6 cards in hand. Our mulligan's basically undone. And it would only cost us 1 white. All right, so we're going to impulse here, even though it costs us a blue card in hand, but the potential upside of it is so much higher. And of course we hit Jace. Unfortunately, you can't slam Jace and protect it with Force and Negation. We do draw Treachery, so we have a much better card to force with if we need to. Or we can let them play something and then steal it with Treachery is also quite good. So really, and then the opponent misses a land drop, so here we are suddenly hitting land drops when they're missing them. Get a Sphinx looking real good here. Could have possibly ran out of Vindicate right there on one of their lands and then countered, but the thing is, if they miss another land drop, so this is Brian playing and playing smart. If we attempt to destroy a land there and then they counter, we're probably not going to counter back because we want to use the counter defensively. So that means that they would draw a card, and if they don't draw a land, they would have gone from 7 cards to 6, drawn a card to 7. If they didn't draw a land, then they finish their turn and that's it. By not vindicating, they have no play. They have 7 cards in hand to start their turn. They draw a card and go to 8. If they don't draw a land or a play, then they end up having to discard. So by not vindicating, we're actually pressuring their hand. So it actually made sense to not make a play there. Opponent does draw a Vampiric Tutor, so we're going to actually hard cast a Force of Negation, and they run out of mana drain on it, but they didn't. They did this pre-combat. They didn't empty their attack step, so they get the mana and may not be able to use it. As it turns out, they can, but they use it to play this weird card that only works if they have creatures in play, and they have no creatures in play, so we're not super worried about it right now. And that opens the window up for a tasty Jace. We just decide to plus Jace up and target them because they're having mana problems after all. We're going to continue to go after that. I believe is what we did. Opponent runs out of Phyrexian Arenas, quite good, but of course we have Vindicate. It's actually too slow for the format in our opinion, but it's good here. It draws a Vindicate. All right, so we're going to Imperial Seal here. Not sacrificing the Delta using the fact that it's also a swamp. The reason we're not sacking the Deltas, we could sacrifice the Delta to get a Mystic Sanctuary at some point if we need to replay one of the cards from our graveyard. Notice, of course, always keeping the counter magic up. When it goes for their commander, the commander's not too threatening. We give them Damnation or 2 lands. They dig 2 lands. So, all right. Well, Mystic Sanctuary is not going to be returning any of those cards. But unfortunately for the opponent, they exiled before before the strip mine was used. So actually, we're good with that. So we're going to go ahead and on this turn, snag their commander and untap our 5 lands, and go for a huge tempo swing turn. Strip mine them. Sveen's the strip mine them again, and pass. And so just like that, we took their commander and killed 2 of their lands. Bad situation for the opponent to be in. Still sitting on a counterspell. Opponent bounces the commander or something, and then goes for a duress, which we counter. Don't really care about their commander much, but a duress, yeah, we do care about. All right, our turn. So we fetch because we didn't like our top cards with Jace. We're going Jace. Find a Necropotence. It's just gross. Run out the flashback Sphenes on land and, you guessed it, strip mine. We're going to strip mine their island again, and this time slam Necro and grab 5 cards, and at that point the opponent's had enough and they give up. So, amazing. Necro did finally do something for us. And it, of course, drew 5. It won the game like it always does, but and turned off the mana vault, so we won't take damage from it because we don't have a draw step. And the worst thing here is that even if the Sveen's play with the strip mine was just brutal, as you could see. But even if we're all out, we've Sveen's, we flashed it back, it's gone. But we could still, from this situation, without even looking, we can play the commander and go get a wasteland here and then continue to pressure their mana even further. So super awesome game against Turbo Bird there, where the deck performs nicely. And then I played one game with the deck in the exact configuration it's in. And it's the game I played right before we started here, just a few hours ago before I started recording. I guess that'd be about 4 hours at this point. Got a nice little mana crypt draw, and this is MEP637 playing Azuri Claw of Progress. I'm going to go ahead and Spellseeker and just grab a Demonic Tutor. Alright, so opponent runs out of land and passes, so I'll flip, and I'm going fairly aggressive here. So I'm going to go ahead and DT right away and then go get myself a Sylvan Library. So that's finally coming into use, and now you can see, if you had forgotten like I had on how dumb and broken Sylvan can be, you get to see it now. So I'm going to go ahead and draw 2 cards thanks to Sylvan. I pay 4 life. And Golos out of Strip Mine. Opponent gets a mana dork out and plays another mana creature. Okie dokie. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and draw 2 more cards, pay 4 more life, Strip Mine the opponent, Impulse into those options? I don't think so. I think we're bugging. Well, that's disappointing. another bugged game. Most of this was correct, but yeah, I ended up grabbing a deluge, and I wait for my opponent to play their commander using creature mana, and then I deluge like their board away, and I actually pay enough to kill Golos, I think, on purpose, so that I can replay Golos and get no, I don't even do that. I just deluge enough to kill all their guys, and I keep Golos in play. But I also tutored this turn with an Enlightened, and I got a Crucible, and so I strip block them out of the game. They played one land and used it to play their commander off creature mana. When I clear all their creatures away with Toxic Deluge, they're left with absolutely, like literally nothing in play. And I've drawn, and by then I drew 2 cards off Sylvan, 2 cards off Sylvan, 2 cards off Sylvan, and then I was just so far ahead that the game was over. So that's it for the intro to the Golos deck. You should be seeing more of it. Hopefully you enjoyed the gameplay. I said it's been a long time since I've posted, and hopefully you haven't lost y'all of your interest. But either way, I appreciate you. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you think. I'm interested in your comments and feedback. Is there anything I've missed for this commander? Sometimes people are like, hey, if you play this one card, it makes an infinite loop, or whatever, and I just don't, because I don't tend to play combo. I tend to miss stuff like that. I like synergies, but I don't really like combos. But I mean, if there's something in there that's easy and we can put it in, let me know in the comments. And otherwise, any other suggestions you have, some cards that I'd really like to have in here. I hate not playing with Disenchant. It was very painful in the game where the opponent had Sylvan. If you have any suggestions for how to get Disenchant in here, that would help. Ancient Grudge is also a card I'd like. Sylvan Scrying is a card I would like. Are there other cards that I haven't thought of? I'll look forward to your comments. All right, that's all I've got. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.